August is the time when many people believe the gardening season is almost over. Summer crops begin to slow down, empty spaces start appearing in the garden beds, and many gardeners are already thinking about putting away their seeds and waiting until next spring. But gardeners who truly understand the season see a completely different opportunity. The soil in August is still warm enough for seeds to germinate quickly, while the cooler weeks ahead will help many vegetables become crisper, more tender, and more flavorful. This is not only the time to harvest what was planted earlier in the season, it is also the final window for starting a new fall garden. However, that window will not remain open forever. Some plants can tolerate frost, while others must complete their harvest before the first cold nights arrive. On today's list, some vegetables can reach the table in only a few weeks. Some become more delicious as temperatures fall, and the plant in the number one position is racing directly against the weather. Plant it just 1 or 2 weeks too late, and you could miss the entire harvest. Let us begin right now. Scallions. Scallions are not the kind of vegetable that will make your neighbors stop at the fence and ask what you are growing. They do not produce large heads or do not have brightly colored roots, and they do not require a tall trellis or a large patch of ground, but they may be the plant you use more often than almost any other vegetable on this list. Scallions appear on eggs, salads, noodles, soups, potatoes, rice, grilled dishes, and nearly anything that needs a final touch of fresh flavor. Having a roll of scallions just outside the kitchen door offers a very different kind of convenience from a large harvest that arrives only once. You do not need to plan ahead. You simply step outside, cut a few green leaves, and use them while they are still crisp and fragrant. Scallion seeds can be sown directly in August. Sprouts usually appear within 7 to 14 days, depending on temperature and moisture. The plants need more time to reach their full size, but you can begin using the young leaves earlier. Sow them in a narrow row along the edge of a garden bed, in a long container, or in small spaces that larger plants cannot use. Scallions do not need much horizontal room. What they need most during the early stage is consistent moisture. The seeds are very small, and the young seedlings are initially quite delicate. If the soil surface dries out completely during germination, the row may emerge thin and uneven. There is one technique that can extend your harvest. Instead of pulling up the entire plant whenever you need it, use scissors to cut the green leaves, leaving about 1 inch above the soil. The remaining base may continue producing new leaves when conditions are favorable. Later growth is often smaller than the first cutting, but one sowing can still provide several harvests before cold weather truly brings the season to an end. You can also sow several batches about 10 days apart. The first sowing provides scallions in late September. The second continues into October. In places with mild fall weather, the final plants may survive much longer than most people expect. Scallions are not the most dramatic choice, but gardening is not only about producing harvests that amaze everyone. Sometimes the greatest value comes from a small vegetable that is always ready whenever you step into the kitchen. Arugula. If you do not enjoy waiting, arugula may be the vegetable for you. While carrots are still struggling to germinate and cauliflower is busy building its leaves, arugula may already be appearing in your salad bowl. Many varieties allow you to begin harvesting baby leaves in only 21 to 30 days. That makes arugula one of the fastest results an August garden can deliver. But speed is not the only reason to plant this vegetable at the end of summer. Arugula has a very clear relationship with temperature. When it grows in hot weather, the leaves often become strongly peppery, slightly bitter, and sometimes too intense for people who are not accustomed to the flavor. As cooler nights begin to arrive, that sharpness starts to soften. The leaves keep their distinctive personality, but the flavor becomes more balanced, slightly nutty, fresh, and easier to combine with other ingredients. One of the most common mistakes is allowing the leaves to grow too large. Arugula leaves measuring about 2 to 3 inches are usually tender and mild. When they grow much larger, especially under hot and dry conditions, the flavor can become powerful enough to dominate an entire dish. So, harvest early. Use scissors to cut about 1 inch above the soil and leave the base intact. If the growing point is not damaged, the plant may produce another flush of leaves within 10 to 14 days. Do not sow the entire packet in a single afternoon. Sow a small patch now, plant another patch about 2 weeks later. 2 or 3 small sowings will provide a more consistent supply of tender leaves than one large planting. If early August is still very hot, select a location that receives morning light and afternoon shade. Keep the soil surface moist during germination. Once established, the plants can tolerate slightly drier conditions, but consistent moisture still produces more tender and less intensely peppery leaves. Arugula is a reminder that a fall garden does not always need several months to produce results. Sometimes 3 weeks and a pair of scissors are enough to begin a new harvest. Kohlrabi. If you saw kohlrabi for the first time without a label, you might not know what to call it. It does not look completely like a root vegetable or look like an ordinary stem either. A round structure swells above the soil with leaves growing outward in several directions, making the entire plant look like an object from another kind of garden. But that round part is not a root. It is an enlarged stem. And although its appearance seems complicated, eating kohlrabi is incredibly simple. Peel away the outer skin, slice it thinly. Eat it raw. The flesh inside is crisp and juicy, with a flavor somewhere between a broccoli stem and an apple that is not overly sweet. You can also shred it for salad, stir-fry it quickly, or roast it until the surface begins to brown and the flavor becomes richer and nuttier. August is a good time to start kohlrabi because the plant prefers to develop its swollen stem under cooler conditions. Many varieties need approximately 45 to 60 days to mature. The seeds can germinate in late summer soil, while the most important part of the plant develops as September temperatures begin to fall. Kohlrabi does not require a deep bed like carrots, but it does need enough room for the enlarged stem to develop evenly. When plants are too crowded, they may produce plenty of leaves, but only small stems. Thin them early and leave the strongest plants. There is one rule more important than all the others. Do not try to grow the largest kohlrabi possible. Kohlrabi tastes best when harvested young. When the swollen stem reaches approximately 2 to 3 inches in diameter, or the size recommended on the seed packet, begin checking it. If the plant is left to grow too long, the inside can become fibrous, hard, and less juicy. White Vienna and purple Vienna are two popular varieties. Their flavors are quite similar. The purple variety simply creates a more striking outer color among the green leaves. Kohlrabi is not the most familiar vegetable, but that is exactly why it deserves a place in the fall garden. Sometimes the best way to renew your excitement about growing food is to plant something you never knew you might enjoy. Lettuce. Every gardener who has watched summer lettuce bolt and become bitter deserves a second chance. August provides that opportunity. Lettuce can almost become a completely different plant when temperatures begin to fall. During June and July, long days and hot weather cause it to send up a flower stalk quickly. The leaves lose their tenderness. More white sap appears and the flavor becomes bitter within a short period of time. But lettuce planted at the end of summer is not growing toward hotter weather. It is growing toward fall. The greatest difficulty occurs during germination. Lettuce seeds can enter a dormant state when the soil becomes too warm. That is why some gardeners sow seeds, water carefully, and still see no seedlings appear. The seeds are not necessarily dead. They may simply be waiting for better conditions. The solution is to create a cooler environment around the planting area. Choose a location with afternoon shade. Moisten the soil before sowing. Plant the seeds very shallowly, then cover the area with a light material to slow evaporation. You can place shade cloth above the bed, but avoid pressing heavy material directly against the soil. Once the seedlings emerge and reach a few inches in height, they can tolerate the remaining late summer heat much better than they could as seed. Give priority to leaf lettuce varieties, slow bolting varieties, or those labeled heat tolerant. Leaf lettuce can be harvested by removing the outer leaf. The center continues growing and provides repeated harvests. You can also cut the entire plant while the leaves are still young for a single baby leaf harvest. Many varieties provide baby leaves in approximately 25 to 30 days and need additional time to reach full size. But what makes August lettuce special is not only its speed, it is the direction in which the weather is moving. With every passing week, the nights become cooler. Instead of forcing the plant to bolt, the changing season helps the leaves remain crisp and mild. If summer lettuce has disappointed you, do not assume that you do not know how to grow it. Perhaps this vegetable was simply waiting for you to try again at the right time. Mustard greens. Mustard greens do not have a shy flavor. They do not try to taste like lettuce, and they are not as gentle as spinach. A mustard leaf grown in hot weather can be peppery, pungent, and strong enough to make someone pause after the first bite. But that is not the only version of this vegetable. When mustard greens mature during cooler days, their flavor changes noticeably. The heat remains, but it becomes less sharp. A little sweetness appears behind it. The leaves become more balanced and can be used in several different ways. Mustard greens grow quickly. Many varieties can provide baby leaves in about 3 weeks and reach cooking size in approximately 30 to 45 days. But planting time has a major influence on flavor. If your region is still experiencing intense heat, do not rush to sow at the beginning of the month. Wait until the second half of August or find a location with afternoon shade. The plants will establish their roots in the remaining warmth, then produce most of their foliage as temperatures begin to fall. You can harvest mustard greens in 2 completely different ways. Pick the leaves while they are small and eat them raw. At this stage, they are tender, mildly peppery, and add interest to salads. Or allow the leaves to grow larger and then saute, steam, or cook them slowly. Heat from cooking softens the sharpness while preserving the deeper flavor. Harvest the outer leaves first and allow the center to continue growing. Do not let the soil alternate between being extremely dry and overly wet. Stress from lack of water can make the leaves tougher and the flavor stronger. One properly timed sowing can provide repeated harvests throughout September and October. Mustard greens are not for people who want every vegetable to have the same gentle flavor. They are for those who want the garden to have personality. And in cool weather, that personality does not disappear. It simply becomes more refined. Beets. Most people think growing beets means waiting for a root to develop below the soil. Gardeners who have grown them know that the plant provides 2 different harvests. The first appears above ground. Young beet leaves are edible several weeks before the roots are ready. They have a flavor similar to spinach, but slightly deeper and with a distinctive earthy note. You can use young leaves in salads or saute them with garlic and olive oil. However, do not remove all the foliage. The plant still needs its leaves to produce the energy that feeds the developing root below. The second harvest appears after approximately 50 to 70 days, depending on variety and growing conditions. Sowing in August allows the seeds to germinate while the soil is still warm, while the roots mature during the cooler weeks of fall. Lower temperatures help the roots develop a milder and sweeter flavor than those forced to grow in intense heat. Something surprising often happens after the seeds germinate. You sow one seed, but 2 or 3 seedlings may appear from the same point. That is because what is commonly called a beet seed is actually a cluster containing several seeds. If every seedling is allowed to remain, the roots become crowded and stay small. Thin the plants while they are still young. The removed seedlings can be washed and used as microgreens rather than discarded. When the shoulder of the beet begins to rise above the soil, you can observe its size without digging up the entire plant. Harvest when the root reaches the diameter appropriate for the variety. If left too long, the texture may become fibrous and the sweetness may decline. Chioggia is a variety that turns cutting open a beet into a moment worth anticipating. The outside looks fairly ordinary, but when sliced across the center, the flesh reveals concentric rings of pink and white, almost like a pattern drawn by hand. One sowing, leaves first, roots later. That is why beets provide more than most gardeners expect from one small packet of seeds. Broccoli is not a difficult plant to grow. It is simply planted at the wrong time, surprisingly often. Many gardeners started in spring. The plant produces leaves for several weeks. Then, exactly when the head needs to form slowly and tightly, the heat of early summer arrives. The result is a small, loose head that quickly turns yellow or begins opening into flowers before reaching the desired size. The gardener decides broccoli is too difficult. But the problem is not the plant. The problem is the weather during head formation. Broccoli prefers to mature in cool conditions, and that is exactly what a late summer planting can provide. For August planting, starting with transplants is usually more reliable than sowing seeds directly outdoors too late. A healthy transplant with approximately 4 to 6 true leaves can use the remaining late summer warmth to build its stem and foliage. When it enters the head-forming stage in September or October, temperatures are more suitable. Many varieties need approximately 60 to 80 days from transplanting. Read the plant label carefully because days to maturity are sometimes counted from the transplanting date rather than the original sowing date. Belstar, Calabrese, and other short-season varieties are often selected for fall production. But the variety name matters less than whether the plant has enough time to mature before a hard freeze. When the main head is firm and the flower buds are still small and tightly closed, harvest it. Do not wait for the buds to begin separating just to gain a little more size. And after cutting the main head, do not pull out the plant. Side shoots may continue developing from the leaf joints for several weeks. They are smaller than the first head, but often just as tender, flavorful, and useful. One broccoli plant can provide several harvests when you allow it to continue growing. This vegetable teaches a very clear lesson. Success does not always come from providing more care. Sometimes you simply need to let the plant mature in the season to which it naturally belongs. Turnips. Turnips are one of those vegetables that have been judged by the worst version of themselves. Most people who say they dislike turnips have eaten roots that were too large, too old, fibrous, and aggressively sharp. But a young turnip harvested when it is only about the size of a golf ball is a completely different vegetable. The difference does not always come from the variety. It comes from the timing of the harvest. Turnips usually need approximately 40 to 60 days to produce roots, depending on the variety. When sown in August, the seeds germinate in warm soil and the roots develop as fall temperatures begin to decline. Those conditions help create a crisper texture and a more balanced flavor. Hackeré is a well-known salad turnip. The roots are small, white, smooth, and can be eaten raw while young. If your only previous experience has been with large storage turnips, Hackeré may completely change the way you think about this vegetable. But the root is not the only harvest. Turnip greens can be used before the roots reach full size. The young leaves can be sautéed or cooked like mustard greens. They have a slightly peppery flavor and a substantial texture. Remove only a portion of the outer leaves so the plant still has enough energy to develop its root. Turnips must be thinned early. If the plants stand too close together, the leaves may still grow well, but the roots will not have room to expand. The seedlings removed during thinning can be used as baby greens rather than discarded. At harvest time, do not wait for the largest possible root. Harvest when the root reaches its best quality. A small, crisp, sweet turnip is far more valuable than a huge but woody one. Turnips are not truly a bad-tasting vegetable. They are simply left in the ground too long, far too often. Spinach spring. Spinach always lives in a race. The seeds have barely germinated. The plant has only produced a few rounds of leaves. Then the days become longer. Temperatures rise and a flower stalk begins to appear. Once the plant bolts, the leaves quickly become bitter and the harvest ends. Spinach sown at the end of summer has the opposite experience. Ahead of it is fall. But before it reaches those favorable conditions, the seed must overcome the first challenge. August soil may still be too warm. Spinach germinates poorly at high soil temperatures. That is why you should not sow it in a location receiving intense sunlight all day during the hottest part of the month. Choose the second half of August if your climate remains hot. Sow in the evening. Select a location with light shade. Water the soil before planting and keep the surface evenly moist. Some gardeners place the seeds in a damp paper towel in a cool location until they begin to wake up, then carefully transfer them into the soil. Once the seedlings have emerged and developed a few true leaves, the hardest part is nearly over. Falling temperatures help the plant focus on producing foliage rather than flower stalks. Baby leaves can be harvested after approximately 25 to 30 days. Pick the outer leaves first and allow the center to continue growing, or sow more densely and cut the entire plant while it is still young. Bloomsdale Longstanding and other varieties labeled Slow Bolt are often suitable for this seasonal transition, but even the best variety cannot compensate for soil that is too hot and dry. Timing remains the most important factor. August spinach only needs to survive the final part of summer. After that, every cooler night helps it become more tender, sweeter, and more deeply flavored. Collard greens. If lettuce is a delicate vegetable that needs protection from extreme temperatures, collard greens stand almost at the opposite end of the spectrum. They are among the toughest leafy vegetables in the fall garden. The leaves are large. The plant can remain standing when many other vegetables have stopped growing. Collards do not provide a harvest as quickly as arugula. They do not have a colorful root like beets. Their strength is their ability to produce over a long period. Plants set out in August can build foliage through September, then continue providing leaves for many weeks as temperatures decline. In places with short autumns, starting with transplants is safer than sowing seeds too late. Give each plant enough room. Collards can grow much larger than many gardeners expect. When planted too closely, the broad leaves overlap, reducing air circulation and forcing the plants to compete for water and nutrients. Once the plants reach harvestable size, remove the lowest and outermost leaves first. The center continues producing new leaves, causing the stem to grow taller after each harvest. One plant can provide leaves for months if conditions do not become too severe. The large leaves are well suited to slow cooking, sautéing, or being used as wraps. The central rib can be quite tough and is often removed before cooking. Young leaves are more tender and require less preparation. The most rewarding change comes after cold nights. Low temperatures can soften the strong and slightly bitter flavor of collards. The taste becomes deeper, sweeter, and more pleasant. The first frost is not necessarily the end of the plant. In many cases, it improves it. Collard greens do not provide one single dramatic harvest. They are the vegetable that keeps giving while the garden around them slowly becomes quiet. Carrots can test a gardener's patience before the plants even appear. The seeds are small, they are sown shallowly, and they may need 2 or 3 weeks to germinate. In August, that long period becomes the greatest challenge. The soil surface can dry out in only a few hours. A seed absorbs water, then loses it before germination can be completed. The result is a row of carrots that emerges thinly, unevenly, or not at all. The solution is not to apply a large amount of water once. What carrots need is light but continuous moisture. After sowing, water with a gentle stream so the seeds are not washed away. Cover the row with damp burlap or another lightweight moisture-retaining material. Some gardeners place a thin wooden board over the seeded row for several days. The board prevents the surface from drying under the sun, but it must be checked every morning. The moment you see tiny sprouts appearing, remove the covering immediately so the seedlings receive light. Once the carrots germinate, thin them early. Plants growing too close together cannot form evenly shaped roots. They compete and produce roots that are small, bent, or twisted around one another. The soil should also be loose, well-drained, and relatively free of stones. Danvers and Nantes are two groups often selected for fall planting because of their sturdy shape and their ability to grow in soil that is not absolutely perfect. In areas with a short fall season, choose varieties with fewer days to maturity. The reward comes when temperatures decline. Carrots respond to cold weather by accumulating more sugars in the root. A carrot pulled after several cold nights can taste noticeably sweeter than the same variety harvested in hot weather. That is one of the moments that makes home gardening special. You pull a carrot from the soil, wash it, take a bite, and realize that the flavor is completely different from what is commonly purchased at a store. But before reaching that moment, you must get through the first 3 weeks. With carrots, the first harvest is always patience. Kale has a special relationship with cold weather. It does not merely tolerate it. Kale can actually become more delicious because of it. When temperatures fall, the plant converts some of its stored starches into sugars to help protect its cells from cold damage. As a result, leaves harvested after several cold nights are often sweeter, more tender, and milder than leaves grown during hot weather. The difference is not merely theoretical. Kale harvested in November can taste completely different from the same variety picked in September. That is why experienced kale growers do not rush to remove the entire crop before the first frost. They allow the weather to complete part of the work. Sowing or transplanting kale in August gives the plants time to establish before temperatures fall significantly. In regions with short autumns, transplants provide a major advantage. In places with a longer growing season, you can sow directly and thin the plants while they are young. Lacinato produces long, dark green leaves with a heavily textured surface. Red Russian has purple-red stems and more tender young leaves. Winterbore produces thick, curly foliage and has strong cold tolerance. Whatever variety you choose, the most effective harvesting method is similar. Cut the outer leaves from the bottom. Leave the center intact. The plant will continue producing new leaves and gradually grow taller through fall. Young leaves can be eaten raw. Larger leaves are better for sautéing, steaming, soups, or baking into chips. If the leaves are mature, remove the thick central rib before cooking. Kale is often discussed as a nutrient-dense food, but in the garden, what makes it truly valuable is its ability to extend the harvest season. When cold weather has slowed many other plants, kale is still standing. And after each colder night, the plant does not merely survive, it becomes a more delicious version of itself. Radishes, look at the calendar and mark a date approximately 4 weeks from today. If you sow a fast-growing radish variety right now, that may be the day your first harvest appears on the table. Few vegetables provide results as quickly as radishes. Most small round varieties need approximately 22 to 30 days to mature. The seeds germinate quickly in warm soil, often within only a few days. Then, as the plants grow through September, falling temperatures and shortening days create increasingly favorable conditions. Spring radishes race against approaching heat. When planted too late, they are more likely to bolt. The roots become hollow, pithy, and aggressively sharp. August radishes grow in the opposite direction. They begin in warmth but mature in cooler weather. The result is often a crisp, juicy root with a milder, peppery flavor. But their speed also creates a risk. Radishes have a relatively short ideal harvest window. If they remain in the ground too long after reaching maturity, the roots may become fibrous, hollow, or intensely sharp within only a few days. Record the sowing date. Check the days to maturity on the seed packet. When the shoulder of the root begins to rise above the soil and reaches the appropriate size, pull one plant and check it. Do not wait for every root to become exactly the same size. Harvest the largest ones first and leave the smaller plants for a few more days. Sow another short row every 7 to 10 days. Instead of receiving too many radishes at once, you will have several smaller harvests extending through fall. Cherry Belle is a familiar round red variety. French breakfast has an elongated shape with a red upper portion and white tip. Larger daikon varieties require much more time, so they should not be planted on the same schedule as short-season round radishes. Radishes are not the most cold-tolerant crop. They are not the largest and they do not provide the longest harvest. But they offer exactly what a late summer garden needs: a fast result that reminds you the growing season is not over yet. Cauliflower is not a forgiving plant. Broccoli can continue producing smaller side shoots if the main head is imperfect. Kale still provides leaves even when growth is uneven. Cauliflower usually gives you only one opportunity. The white head in the center of the plant must form under stable conditions. Even a brief period of stress can cause the head to form too early, remain too small, or develop a loose structure. That is why succeeding with cauliflower feels more special than succeeding with many other vegetables. August is the time to use healthy transplants rather than waiting for directly sown seeds to begin too late. A transplant approximately 5 to 6 weeks old with a strong stem and healthy leaves has a major advantage. Many varieties need 60 to 90 days from transplanting to reach maturity. Therefore, check the first expected frost date very carefully. In places with short falls, early August may be the final planting limit. In regions with mild winters, the planting window may remain open longer. Transplant in the cool afternoon or on a cloudy day to reduce stress. Water thoroughly after planting. Cover the soil with organic mulch to retain moisture and reduce temperature fluctuations around the roots. Cauliflower does not like soil that becomes completely dry and is then suddenly flooded. What the plant needs is stability. When the white head begins to appear, some varieties need protection from sunlight to preserve a pale color. You can fold several outer leaves over the head and secure them loosely, but check frequently because trapped moisture can cause rot. Self-blanching varieties reduce the need for this step. Harvest when the head is still firm even, and the individual sections have not begun separating. Do not wait for greater size if the structure is already becoming loose. A delay of only a few days can change the quality noticeably. Cauliflower stands near the end of this list, not because it is easy to grow. It is here because producing a firm, white, nearly perfect head in the middle of a fall garden is one of the most satisfying achievements a gardener can experience. You are not merely harvesting a vegetable, you are harvesting the result of choosing the right time and maintaining stable conditions for many weeks. Bush beans. The final plant does not stand at number 1 because it loves cold weather. It is here because cold weather is chasing it. Bush beans are a warm season plant. The seeds need warm soil to germinate. The plants need enough warm days to produce stems, flowers, and pods, and a single light frost can destroy the entire crop overnight. That is why bush beans fit the phrase "as soon as possible" better than any other vegetable on this list. You cannot wait until the end of August before making a decision. Every day of delay is taken away from the time the plant needs to complete its harvest. Most bush bean varieties need approximately 45 to 65 days before they begin producing pods. But you should not simply look at that number and count exactly to the first frost date. As days shorten and nights cool, plant growth can slow down. Add a safety margin of at least 1 or 2 weeks. If a variety needs 55 days and your region has only 60 frost-free days remaining, the plant is extremely risky. If you have 70 or 75 days, the chances are much better. Unlike pole beans, bush beans do not need a tall trellis. The plants remain low and compact, and they usually produce most of their pods within a fairly concentrated period. That makes them suitable for a late planting. The seeds should be sown directly in the soil. Beans generally do not like having their roots disturbed during transplant. Plant according to the spacing shown on the seed packet. Then water enough to keep the soil moist without making it waterlogged. Bean seeds are large and can rot if they remain too long in cold, wet soil. When the plants begin flowering, consistent moisture becomes especially important. A lack of water at this stage can cause flowers to drop and reduce the number of pods. But avoid soaking the foliage late in the day because leaves that remain wet for long periods can encourage disease. Provider, Contender, Blue Lake 274, and Strike are examples of relatively fast bush varieties. However, select a variety according to its days to maturity and the conditions where you live, not only according to the picture on the seed packet. Harvest when the pods are long and firm, but the seeds inside have not yet begun swelling noticeably. When mature pods remain on the plant, it begins directing energy toward completing the seed. When young pods are harvested regularly, the plant has a reason to continue producing more flowers and pods, and this is what makes bush beans the #1 plant. Every vegetable before this one is waiting for cooler weather to arrive so it can grow at its best. Bush beans are trying to complete everything before temperatures fall too far, and when planted early enough, they can provide one final harvest of fresh beans just before frost closes the door on the growing season. But when planted too late, the plants may still germinate. They may still grow green and healthy and produce plenty of leaves. Then the first frost arrives before the first pods reach harvestable size. All that work can end in a single night. That is why bush beans are not merely a vegetable that can be planted in August. They are a vegetable that requires you to act in August, not several weeks later, not after you have finished clearing the entire garden. But as soon as you confirm that enough frost-free days remain, bush beans are the countdown clock of the late summer garden, and that clock has already started running. August is not the end of the gardening season. It is the moment when the garden shifts from the heat of summer into the slower but highly promising rhythm of fall. Beds that seem to have completed their work can still produce an entirely new harvest as long as the seeds are planted at the right time. The most important thing is not to grow as much as possible, but to understand how much time remains where you live. Check the first expected frost date. Read the days to maturity on the seed packet and choose your planting time accordingly. One correct decision in August can keep the garden green and productive for many weeks or even several months after most people have stopped planting. So do not see empty spaces as evidence that the season is over. See them as one final opportunity to begin something new. Because sometimes the most memorable harvests do not begin during the first days of spring. They begin with a seed placed in the soil before the August window closes. Which vegetable are you ready to plant first? Share your choice and growing zone in the comments. If this guide has changed how you view the late summer garden, please subscribe to our channel and like this video. We are uncovering the growing secrets that help your garden thrive year-round. Plant for the future. The next harvest of knowledge will be ready soon.